This is Pasco County, Florida Sheriff Chris Noco, America's most corrupt sheriff. He's the one who instituted something called predictive policing, which is straight up harassment of people who live in Pasco County, who basically they don't like. The sheriff's office has an issue with some of them, and they harass the hell out of them. So he's under investigation, and there's some lawsuits that are going to be filed or already have. Now, I promised that I'd have a part 3 on how to beat a fair to ID case, and that's what this is. This particular incident occurred in Pasco County, Florida, where sheriff's deputies falsely arrested this African-American passenger for failing to ID, only of course they couch it under something else. Now, this is a situation that I cover very extensively in part 2 of Rise of the Oathbreakers, and I think you will appreciate that not only do I talk about what the problems are, I actually provide a legal defense right there, written step by step in the book. And I give a lot of examples. Okay, this news story is going to give us some background, what happened, and, a little information about the lawsuit and whatever. But before I get any further into this, whoever keeps hitting me with copyright claims, I guess you don't like me, don't like my message, whatever. But it's getting a little bit far-fetched when you hit me up with a copyright claim on my channel talking about my book. You see what's going on here, guys. So I'm going to find out who it is. It's one of the benefits of being retired law enforcement.
Lawsuit over an arrest. The man put in handcuffs calls it unjust, and a judge agreed, dropping the charges against him. ABC Action News reporter Heather Lee walks us through the body camera footage from that night.
You got your ID on you too, sir?
I'm a passenger. I'm not required to identify.
In the state of Florida.
It's a sentence that would eventually put Andre Rocks behind bars in 2018. With cameras rolling, Pasco County deputies eventually say they stopped Rocks, his father, and uncle for a partially folded tag and faulty trailer lights, but not before demanding IDs from everyone in the car, with Rocks refusing, citing his Fourth Amendment rights.
If you want to play that game, we can pull you out and I can take you to jail for resisting.
Rocks' dad eventually told deputies his son's name, but things began to escalate when deputies tell everyone they need to get out of the van while they conduct a canine narcotics search.
I'm not asking you to. I'm telling you to at this point.
The more I watch these videos, I just get so pissed. This was a simple traffic stop for some equipment violation. Now these deputies, because they're getting federal overtime and they got all this crap tied up in a canine, are going to do a sniff. This stop had nothing to do with anything in terms of drugs or narcotics. And look what happens. Look at this. Thanks a lot, Supreme Court. You guys really suck.
And the moment his feet hit the pavement, deputies begin handcuffing Rocks. The deputy first saying he isn't under arrest, but quickly changing his mind.
What action have I taken to commit resisting arrest?
Now give me your name. That's resisting arrest.
That is not resisting arrest.
I'd actually trust Doofy more than those Pasco County Sheriff's deputies. At least Doofy, when he screws up, isn't probably going to threaten to hurt someone like those deputies did. See, what happens is, because they don't know the scope of their authority, guys, when they start demanding ID and you hear what they say? I mean, they don't have the lawful authority to do it, but as soon as they demand it, now the threats start. We can pull you out of the vehicle. We can rip you out of the vehicle. So here come the threats of violence. And you have to comply. There's something else going on. They had the authority to ask him to step out, but they went hands-on. They handcuffed these guys. They searched these guys. They couldn't articulate for the passenger reasonable suspicion of a crime. And they certainly couldn't articulate reasonable suspicion that he might have been armed and dangerous. Guys, the Pasco County sheriffs did everything wrong. Okay, let's get started on this. Now remember, this is about false arrest for not identifying as an innocent passenger. First things first, know your rights. Second thing, when it comes to mounting a defense against these kind of false arrests over ID, is you have to know Terry v. Ohio and Brown v. Texas inside and out. Okay, we know that because everything hinges upon reasonable suspicion of a crime. Number 4, you have to film the interaction. Hopefully they are with body cams, but we know the story with those disappearing or being redacted. Number 5, properly document the officer's remarks. You have to do this. You have to document the officer's remark. 2 times in this video, deputy said that the law in Florida requires passengers to identify. Well, when it comes to cross-examination, you're going to take those remarks and you're going to shove them right up his caboose. What law? Where's that law? So there's a law that says you can just demand ID from an innocent passenger and you don't have to articulate any kind of crime? It goes right to the heart of credibility. Number 6, when an officer says the law requires something and the person is non-compliant, doesn't that mean the officer feels that they can use force and violence to ensure compliance? Absolutely. Question: are you willing to use force and violence, or do you believe you're justified in using force and violence? If somebody says, no, I don't have to ID, and you're saying, yes, they do. Number 7, ask them to define reasonable suspicion. Number 8, have them summarize both Terry v. Ohio and Brown v. Texas. What do they have in common? Before you can start demanding ID, they both require a particularized crime. Articulate a particularized crime. Can they do that when they start demanding ID inside a car? Or any mode of transportation? Hell, it doesn't have to be a car, guys. Why couldn't they do the same thing if you're on a plane or a train? Or how about a bus? According to their interpretation of this phantom law, if they stopped a bus driver for speeding and there were 50 passengers, that they could demand every passenger surrender their ID, and if they don't comply, they beat them up and throw them in a cage? That's exactly what they're saying. They want to say there's a law in Florida that says you have to ID as an innocent passenger. Well, where does that stop? I hope you're getting a sense how easy it is to put a twist on these idiot officers. It's easy. You can take everything that they say and do and just destroy them in about 4.5 minutes. In fact, there's a couple questions that you could ask that would do it in about 4.5 seconds. Well, the officer enforces the Fourth Amendment search and seizure stuff. He has to know how to properly apply it, right? We're talking about credibility, knowledge, experience, training. Well, if they don't know, they don't know, and you can show that. I mean, this is the stuff that goes right to what? Beyond a reasonable doubt. Easy. So tell them, just ask them one question. Well, let's go with 2, but one question would be, what items have to be left behind after serving a search warrant? Well, every cop has to know that. If they do, they do. But if they don't, do you understand what you just did? They're called challenge questions. And they are relevant because it's all about Fourth Amendment constitutional law. And here's a second question you can ask them. Do you make vehicle stops? Well, then what's a Carroll search? They have to know what a Carroll search is. I mean, that's like a carpenter not knowing, well, what's that? Well, that's a screw. What's that? That's a nail. See, they have to know this stuff, but they don't. So there's 2 challenge questions, and you could ask those all day long. I actually have a section in part 2 of Rise of the Oathbreakers where I have 10 questions that you can ask a cop. You could pick any 1 or 2 or 3 of those, but they apply. They're relevant. Okay, so what you're looking to do is when you destroy their credibility, whatever foundation that they think they have in the Fourth Amendment, poof, boom, gone. And now this is where they start realizing that I should have gone into a different line of work like picking peaches. Same thing for the prosecutor. You know, the prosecutor in this case took the case. He prosecuted this guy. What a racket. Now, as we wrap up the back half, these questions are going to become more focused, and you'll get an idea what I'm talking about. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the remarks made by the officer, which are supposed to be properly documented, and completely twist them, put them in a position where their own words are going to hang them. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. Remember, this isn't just about making the prosecutor and the officer look stupid, because they can do that all on their own. No, this is about sending a special message to the prosecutor and kind of in a roundabout way the judge, but for the prosecutor. And that message is, don't you dare think about doing this ever again. You don't prosecute innocent people, especially when a crime has been manufactured. And then you turn around and you go from fair to ID to resisting. Why wasn't he charged with failing to ID? Why do you always have to change? I know the game you're playing, it can be kind of hard to convey the message of that game, but you know what you're doing. And I don't mean in a good way. I mean, this is crap. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Take your oath and shove it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and sharpen the knives, shall we? Remember, we're starting with the premise, that you lose your Fourth Amendment right to privacy when you get into a car. Well, what do you think the first question is? The first question is, does a person lose their Fourth Amendment right to privacy just because they get into a car? Yes or no? It's yes or no. Or how about, is it whole or in part? Okay, and then you follow that up with, you think that people don't have a Fourth Amendment right to privacy in a car. What other rights do they give up just because they're in a car? Well, it's got to be more than the Fourth Amendment. How about the first? The second? How about the entire Bill of Rights? Is that what you're saying, Deputy? That everybody loses all their rights just because they get into 3,000 pounds of glass, metal, and plastic? Well, here's something else I need you to clarify, Deputy. At what point when a person enters a vehicle do they lose their Fourth Amendment right to privacy? Remember, that's how you treat them. You treat people as though the Fourth Amendment disappears when they get into a car. So let me ask you this. When they start to get into a car, at what precise point do they lose their Fourth Amendment right to privacy? Is it when they look at the car? They grab the door handle? Is it when they open the door? Is it when they bend over and lean in? Is it when their butt hits the seat? When one leg gets in, when both legs get in, when they close the door and hook your seatbelt? You tell me. You're the one who treats people like they lose their Fourth Amendment rights in a car. Well, I need you to clarify some more things for me, Deputy. You think that a person loses their Fourth Amendment rights when they get into a car. When do they get those rights back? Answer the question. When do they get their rights back? Well, we know, according to your interpretation and enforcement philosophy, that they don't have any rights in a car. But what happens when they get back out of the car? Well, you treat them like they still don't have any right to privacy. Didn't you go hands-on? Didn't you put them in cuffs? Search them? Tell them where to stand? Currently, our reality in the United States of America is when a free American citizen gets into a car, now they're interacting with law enforcement. They don't have any rights from the time they got into the car until the traffic stop's over. So in reality, they don't get their rights back until you give them back.